Okay, we are live. Welcome to Poetry Goes Viral tonight we have Peter, Emma, and Paisley. This is a bi-monthly series hosted on the Carolina Poets Facebook page. We are here the second and fourth Thursdays starting in 2021. So I'm your host, Andrew Clark, and I'd like to thank my partner in crime, Kimberly Sims Gibbs, who helps to curate this series. For each reading, we feature 3 poets with connections to the Carolinas, which means we host some of the most talented poets on the planet from 2 of the most writingest states. We feature both established poets and emerging voices. So tonight, we are lucky to have 3 outstanding poets. We'll hear first from Paisley Addams, Peter Gloviczki, and we will finish with Emma Stephens. Please ask any questions you have for our poets in the comments below the broadcast, and we will entertain questions at the end. So please let us know if you have any questions. And also, while the poets read, I will drop links to their social media or books. So check those out and please support our poets. If you have books, poets out there in the Carolinas, if you have books coming out in 2021, poetry book, and you're interested in reading for us and haven't, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. So with that, I'd like to bring to the stage Paisley Addams. So Paisley is a creative single mother residing in North Charleston, South Carolina. She's been writing poetry since high school. We're going to see if she'll bring some of that high school poetry out tonight. She has been in a touring band with 3 recorded albums and penned lyrics for several of their songs. Most of her subjects are self-reflective observations triggered by fleeting moments in time. She enjoys staying creative in multiple ways, be it art, music, poetry, or gardening, and sharing them with the community and friends. Check out her band, Tripping the Mechanism, on Instagram at Tripping the Mechanism. And I'm going to drop a link to their Bandcamp, and you can check out their music there. So without further ado, I bring to the stage Paisley Addams.
Hi. Thank you, Carolina Poets, for having me. It's an honor to be here with so many people that have published works, and I hope you enjoy my words. They're going to vary from soulmates to family to children to my sister, who left a lifelong impact on the way I live my life today. So we'll start first with soulmates. I endeavor to approach all as if they are to be my soulmate. There is a lesson to learn, to teach, an experience to share, else we would not have crossed paths. The only bars that hold me are shadows. My hand passes easily through the dark with no feeling, the light without seeing. I need an ally at this time in my life. No more associates, no more adversaries. My soul and yours are allies. We made a promise long ago while waiting in the closet to come find us when it was time to pull away, to help the other if they weren't safe, if they were being led astray. Did we say we would know or recognize the face, the eyes, the hands? Would we have a sense of timing as to avoid the confusion, the torture, the silences? They scream too much. Do you know me? 'Cause I think I know you. Please don't be afraid in this lifetime. And that's that one. That's that one. And then I forgot to say that I like to keep a dream journal, and this has to do with dreams. There's a reoccurring figure that comes into my dreams. They're all blue and they're androgynous, but I see them a lot. I think of you fondly, the figure in my dreams, standing in doorways, helping me through things. You say, I am on my path, take caution in time. Though I wish it was in unison, I hold close to the thought we walk silently beside, with distance between us. A stretch in the dark, floating in oceans, may we become what is, the needle, the eye, the thread, the knot. Each day to be closer to the day that will become the brightest day upon us. When words become direct and truth is not a guess, what is coming to the surface from this world that I dream in? Sometimes the stories are scary sweet. You point to the image and leave a note to find when I awake. I write it down. I keep trying to talk to you. I ask every night before I go to sleep, maybe I will learn your name, my silent helper, my shadow friend. I want to thank you. And that's all from the gray book. Now I have a flower book. And we're going to start there. All right. I'm going to tell a little story after some of these as to what inspired them, in case, I don't know, because I feel like it's relevant. This one's called Chop Wood, Carry Water. It's a Buddhist proverb of some sort, some Eastern thought thing. Just keep busy, head down, one foot in front of the other. The kindness of a stranger. What are we learning? Today the world was cold. It was wet. Fires burned on another coast, but he stopped, rolled down his window. He was prepared, didn't mind the rain. I was relieved. The kindness of a stranger had found me. My car had broke down on John's Island. I was on a road in the middle of the country, and a gentleman named Frank stopped to help me. He added water to my overheating car, and then he gave me the jug of water he had to carry with me so that I could keep adding it to get home in North Charleston. I didn't know him, but he knew people that I worked with and had grown up on the island his whole life. And I told him that I would bring the jug back to him, and he told me to keep it. And it was just a reaffirming moment to me at that time that there are still people in this world that will stop and help a stranger. And that day turned into a beautiful day because of that. Okay, so here's the next poem. Today we encountered the mage, tending to her temple. Is that yours? She said. Put it back if it's not. The stick of her broom was unscrewed from the bristles. Look at this heart, the children said. That's my art. I made that. From their trash, I helped them take care of this temple. Some people, they don't like their job here, so I helped them. I put flowers in their hearts. That one was inspired by a vagrant woman who was living in the gazebo at Hampton Park in downtown Charleston, or maybe she had just taken a nap there. But my daughter and her friend were going towards the duck pond, and we crossed through the gazebo, and they, saw the stick and all of the things that she had. And she asked for the stick back, which belonged to a broom, and then she put it together and began sweeping the cracks and crevices with it. And she was in sock feet. She had a yoga mat to sleep on, and all of her things were on one side of the gazebo. She had taken silver confetti and somehow glued it to the cement and told us that she had put flowers in there, but they were gone, and that it was her art, and it was in the shape of a heart. And she also told us that she liked to keep the roses around the gazebo free of trash. And my daughter told her that roses were her favorite flower. And then I thanked her for her efforts and, hoped that she enjoyed the day because the sun happened to be out that day. It was in the winter, and sometimes we don't get a lot of sun. So that's the story and inspiration for that one. This one's called Perfection Found in Chaos. Sister says that the sky is on fire. Will you fly into the sun to keep me alive? Sister says that the water's emotion. Will you swim into the depths to keep me alive? Step into the chaos that you make. A casualty vampire, I know your name. When we jump into the chaos that we create, we can walk away from the mess that we have made. Sister says that the winds are in turmoil Did you get your kite ready? Do you have enough string? Sister says that our feet are all bare now. We can channel lightning from the ground through our souls. A casualty vampire, I know your name. Don't let the rope cut you before you let go. Sister says our love's eternal. Mama taught us that when we passed through the womb. Sister says that your daughter's a gift child. She's here with you now that I have to go. A casualty vampire, that's what you were then. Today is not chaos. You walked away. Smile with your chin up. You walked away. And that's that one. We're going to go into some more children things. This is one of my favorite. I call it Paperboy. And it was inspired by children playing. I confine you to an island. You are to go there until you learn the joy of a paper airplane, the smile it can bring to a child's face, even when it crashes. Then you must bring that joy back with you. In silent reverence, you are to infuse it in everything you make. From this day forward, all your hate, all your love, every song, every punch of the clock and problem to solve, fold it up, make the creases tight, let it fly, watch it crash, smile, and laugh. We all fall down. Your island and what you learn there, it's with you always. In a city of people, your island is your strength, and you don't need a plane to get there. It's a flame, it's a moth, it's the sun, and it's the dark. And it's tight creases cutting through the air, floating in that one moment of flight that lasted just a bit longer than the other kids. Make me one, they said, and joy grew. With the smile of a child, your island grew. In a world full of cliches, fancy bells and whistles, poignant memes, be plain with simple lines. Hold your moments, share your secrets, smile and crash, fall down, laugh. And this was totally inspired by making paper airplanes with kids. My daughter and her friends were at Hampton Park, and a kid had this piece of paper, and he brought it out, was trying to make an airplane, and just couldn't get all the folds in there. So we made one, and he let it go, and it flew. And then all the other kids came out, and they're like, ah! And so I had kids coming with coloring book pages ripped out, colored on, another kid with like a piece of notebook, and it was all crumbled up into a ball, and we made them into airplanes, and they flew. And those kids and their laughter, it was like, it was so loud, but really it wasn't. It was just loud to me, and all I knew was I wanted to stay there forever, and that joy and that in that moment. And that's why this is one of my favorite poems. This is about my grandmothers. I have two. I'm from the South. If y'all don't know, if you move out of town and you go home, you got to go see your grandmas. And if you don't, that's bad. So this is about having grandmothers in the South. Wenders, maters, switches handpicked by you. Orange slices covered in sugar. No alcohol in front of the children, ever. Deer meat covered in flour, fried in a skillet. Don't say that, that's ugly. Sage advice from you for how to treat our siblings. Hold my pinky as we cross the street. Roses and hot dogs, that's where I met your grandfather. Dr. Pepper and pickles always in the fridge. Meatballs covered in grape jelly. A rooster on the porch to greet you as you walk up and bid you adieu as you leave. And you always stop to say goodbye, every time, even if you have only 10 minutes to spare. No minutes to spare, always a stop, a hug, and goodbye. And that's that one. This is about my daughter. and how she made me feel loved. Some of these have titles, some of these don't. I'll say them if they do. Ice cream. I'll trade you ice cream for art, just to be around adults. We'll walk around downtown and look in store windows. You'll amaze me with your kind and gentle thoughts. All the dresses we can't afford, you tell me, Mommy, you could rock that. With the right shoes, Mommy, that's all you. Cold, wet, and rainy, umbrellas over our heads. I'll walk down these streets forever just to hear you tell me what I could wear that shows me I am beautiful to you, worth the finest to you, even though I know you're still learning the price of $1. Right now, an ice cream is a fancy dress, and I hope we always stay this way, hand in hand, gazing in windows, dreaming. I have 2 more, and this one is about cousins. They're near and dear to me. They're sisters too, right? So, to my girl cousins, I love you. There's a creek in trouble. I can show you. Sticks and leaves have blocked its flow, but we can save it. There's a tobacco barn just standing still with a loft. It needs a club. 4 girls sharing talents and dreams, environmentalism and fashion design, all home under one roof. This one, she's going to run away, yet still surprise them all in obscure ways. This one, she'll be the first to bear a child and a son, a shining light to the rest of what a mother should be, even so young. This one, so tall and beautiful, will own a business and outdo all the boys, never complaining, just pushing through. Then she'll give it all up for yoga, true love, and a peace of mind. And this one, not last, but another first. She'll leave you all too soon. But before she goes, you'll know the lessons she taught will last lifetimes. You'll teach them to your children, and they'll feel every day, every thought, every action. This one is pure. This one knows more than the rest. This one was purpose fulfilled. And the last one is about my sister, who has been a source of inspiration for me forever and ever and ever and always. You will find me in rainbows during the darkest of storms, self-made prisms of glass so you can multiply their occurrence. Hot summer breezes scattered with the laughter of children on the playground. I will wrap you in these moments like painted flowers on your shoulder. You will find me when you are easy on yourself and others. In the seashells and the sand of the beach, I am saying hey to you. As the curtains move in a lavender room, I am saying hey to you. When New Year's Eve comes while lying on the floor, listening to 7 inches spinning, I am saying hey to you. You'll see me in dragonflies, roller coaster rides, and whitewater rapids, Christmas morning, and every birthday cake. You will find me in an open mind and a pure heart. All the times, you are the best version of you. Andrew, thank you. Thank you, Carolina Poets, for having me. I don't know what the time frame was, but I enjoyed reading for y'all. It was a good outlet.
Thank you very much, Paisley. We appreciate it. Can you hang out for a few minutes if we have some questions at the end?
Oh yeah, I'm here. I want to hear everybody else.
All right. Thank you very much. So if you're just joining us, this is Poetry Goes Viral. This is a bi-monthly series hosted on the Carolina Poets Facebook page. We are here the second and fourth Thursdays of each month. I'm your host, Andrew Clark, and I do this with my partner in crime, Kimberly Sims Gibbs. So we feature poets with connections to the Carolinas or some of our neighboring states. We bend the lines sometimes. And so that means we have some very talented poets from some of the most writingest states featured here on the Carolina Poets website. So with that, I'd like to bring to the stage Peter Gloviczki. So Peter Joseph Gloviczki is the author of 3 collections of poetry: The Weight of Dandelions from Salmon Poetry 2019, American Paprika from Salmon Poetry 2016, and Kicking Gravity from Salmon Poetry 2013. His 4th collection, What's Left to the Imagination is Everything, is forthcoming from Salmon Poetry in 2023. I think it's safe to say that publisher really likes you, Peter. His poems have appeared in the Beloit Poetry Journal, Hayden's Ferry Review, New Orleans Review, and elsewhere. He works as an associate professor of communications at Coker University in Hartsville, South Carolina. So with that, Peter, welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. I thought I would begin by reading poems from my first collection, Kicking Gravity. This is the title poem. It's called Door. So what will the ricochet of my right ankle be worth when all the scalpeled men rearrange this bony puzzle in the window, doubling now as a mirror the person I was before I kicked gravity hard in the abdomen? Laugh, babe, that's what you told me. And then when I asked how, I should answer those taller versions of yourself when they appear between the boundaries of what the old architect let in. When he said, here, put it here. Yes, that's it. Now we are home. One of the things that I think is most difficult as a writer is to write formal poems. And I've only ever succeeded at it a few times. This is a poem called Sonnet for Anne. It's after Stephen Dobbins' poem, How to Like It. There are no dogs outside, no men looking into Kenmore's or Amana's. Trash cans were emptied this morning. There is nothing, just my shrill voice making high-pitched demands about borrowing the car, the blue Sebring with the convertible top, to make Anne blush. Her cheeks become cherries, fresh, ripe, Bing, the kind that would have been painted by Rembrandt. Anne turns that cold Pepsi to sweet Riesling. She sends Catholic schoolgirls into a jealous rant. Her hair tastes like lemonade and gin, the kind of trouble all boys want to get in. One of the things I try to do in my poems is to capture moments. This poem is I think, one time when I was successful at trying to do that. It's called A Brief Series of Accidents. Snow off the branch and my wet coat, gravel on my lips, skinned sleeves, the first spring day of the year and how the hospital bed felt, what I asked for when I saw you, and how all the water ran down my chin. I've been very fortunate in my education to have the opportunity to learn about a variety of styles, and prose poems might be one of my favorites. This is a prose poem called Coconuts. My favorite sound is how coconuts get cracked open on the pavement in Hawaii. I heard it happen for the first time during my 17th summer. I like that sound more than anything. I like it more than snow. This is a poem called Light If Left Will. Light if left will bounce all the way out. Spend the heel of your stronger hand. When I'm feeling especially creative, I like to play with words. And this next poem is one time that I think I really found myself being playful. It's called Bend. Bend, if only knees knew not to, and Mays did more so. Regulations, blasted rules, blasted juice in a flask, and thirsty heads forward, present and gifts return, not to mention a forced grin, and necks, when tilted heads express oneness, how flesh fashions itself in the company of bones, given to envy any vessel. Any stick struck by stone might well find itself bent and present again, as if to say, yes, we are here, but where else would we be, I ask you, and still all asleep or almost in the pew next to me? Run, I say, skedaddle, and you're strewn across a verse I never knew, but if anyone asks, I thought it up. And that's just the sky, or is it there? Yes, watch this. Even the clouds, once their shapes pass through different eyes, will bend. I grew up in southeastern Minnesota, and there were quite a few tornadoes and weather events and different sorts of experiences with severe weather. This is a poem called The Tornado Sequence. The sky turns orange when I invite you in. I've got one nice chair, and I offer it as a form of flirtation. My brother phones. How's your house? The neighbor's yard looks like hell, he tells me. Branches everywhere. My brother tells me how he sewed them up. The guy whose tractor trapped him. The woman thrown against her fence. I bought a lottery ticket, he says, on my drive home. Las Vegas has bright signs, I say to him, and I've been fooled by light before, never by wind. Even my best chair failed me. And I think that as much as I like writing about weather, I think that it really is important for you to know that my favorite season is summer. And sometimes I find ways to try and capture that, the sense of what it means, and sometimes how summer can feel both full of opportunity, but full of also worry about the seasons that come afterwards. This is called Summer Scene. Praise a cup left on the porch in a drought. What hope? This is a poem called Double Dutch. Neighbor girls, the bruises on your ankles remind me the jumping rope takes practice. Then I see you lifting yourselves in the driveway off the earth. Me, too. I mentioned earlier that I love prose poems, and this book, which has a beautiful cover that was designed by Siobhan Hudson, who does wonderful cover designs for all of the Salmon Poetry titles, is called American Paprika. This is the title poem. It's called Paprika. There is a town in Hungary that is 3 miles away from the Austrian border. In the winter of 1956, mothers held hands with their sons and daughters and ran as fast as they could. When you asked where they were going, all they said was away. It did not matter where they had been. That was not the point anymore. The point, as far as anyone actually knew, was to keep breathing. Husbands had gone into hiding, pressed a couple of forings into their wives' palms, and then went off to keep breathing. Now it was up to the wives to keep breathing, too. Mothers, of course, had the added burden of making sure their kids kept breathing, so they ran, and to make sure they stayed together, they held hands. I really enjoyed the dream-like poems of our first reader, and I think that there's just something really beautiful and touching in those in the relationships that are in those poems. This poem is called Cosmopolitan Dream. The weight of a half-empty cup in my left hand after dark. Just the moon and Billy Joel on the keys as a passing siren at my open bedroom window reminds me why I moved to the city. This is a poem called Stash. I found my Christmas money, fresh bills, between pages 42 and 43 of a book I've never read. The bills were resting in the middle, not sticking out the top. When I closed the book, when I held it shut, the money disappeared. This is a poem called If You're in Benton, Kentucky. So if you're in Benton, Kentucky, write and tell me what it's like. I've been frozen for 26 years amidst a gaggle of Canadian geese. I hear them in my sleep. Songbirds mean nothing to me. Bright mornings bring their lies by the fistful. This is a poem called Creative Pastoral. Creative Pastoral. While visiting an artist, I show him my sketches. He tells me, this one, this nose reminds me of something worth repeating. Do this, he tells me, 500 times. I gather my drawings and bring them home. This is a poem called Equilibrium. The way I remember my brother is through his black and white photographs, landscapes mostly that he took while on leave from here or there or in between. And I have to wonder these days where memory leads us, how the weight of the past is light and heavy all at once. This is a poem called Coffee. We met for coffee and talked about nothing over onion rings. It was just what we needed. Then we ordered curly fries and shared Kennedy stories. I was on my 8th grade field trip to the Science Museum. You were hanging streamers in the high school gym before a pep rally. We both cried when we heard the news. I was in front of the dinosaur exhibit as I watched the bones go blurry. You dropped a pair of scissors and heard them hit the gym floor. And this is a poem called Sunday Evening. Sunday evening, it is late. I've got one leg in my briefs and I've put on my sleep shirt. On the other side of the wall, someone is playing guitar or piano. There's music in another room. I mentioned earlier that I love brevity, and I'm so honored that Salmon Poetry decided to publish my most recent collection with them, The Weight of Dandelions, because this book, in fact, is a collection of haiku. In case you don't know, haiku are very short poetry, usually in the 575 syllabic structure. And I wanted to share just a few of these poems with you as well. The first poem is called Clear Night. Clear night, the radio brings our team home. The second poem that I want to read from The weight of dandelions is called rummage sale. Rummage sale, combing her dolls for the last time. The title poem from The Weight of Dandelions is called In the Breeze. In the breeze, the weight of dandelions. And one of the things I love about haiku is that when you capture a moment, especially if it's funny, it really gets the audience kind of in that moment and feeling connected to something that's timeless. This is probably my favorite haiku that I've ever been fortunate to author. It's called Queen Size Bed. Queen size bed. The dog lets me sleep there too. And I wanted to share the title poem from my forthcoming collection, which is called What's Left to the Imagination is Everything. Before I share this poem, I want to express my sincere gratitude to Jessie Lendenny, to Siobhan Hudson, and to everyone at Salmon Poetry in Ireland for their ongoing support. They are truly a marvelous poetry press, and they champion their authors. I'm so fortunate that I have become one of the Salmon poets, and I send my love to not only Jessie and Siobhan, but also to all of my pressmates at Salmon. They not only produce beautiful books, but they really do wonderful things to help their authors and to champion their voices. This poem is called On the Radio. So on the radio, what's left to the imagination is everything. I like to turn it up in the car. I like to sing along with no one. I like to imagine myself where the streets have foreign names. Maybe a boy and his girl on their motorbike, winding through cobblestone streets to buy ice cream or coffee or bread, food. Then the pair will ride home. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. Can you hang around for a few minutes in case we have some questions at the end?
Yes, of course.
All right. Thank you very much. We enjoyed that. So if you're just joining us, this is Poetry Goes Viral, hosted by Carolina Poets. We're here the second and fourth Thursday each month with poets that have connections to the Carolinas or a neighboring state. We have had two great readers, Paisley Addams and Peter Gloviczki, join us, and we now will bring to the stage Emma Galloway Stephens. So Emma is a writer and instructor of English and creative writing in Greenville, South Carolina. She'll write poems or stories about any subject given enough time and coffee, but prefers to write about ghosts. She shares her life with her spouse, Samuel, and their pets, Phoebe and Celia, which are cats, Orlando, a bearded dragon, and Monty, a ball python. She is also an MFA candidate at Converse College. So with that, I welcome to the stage Emma Stephens.
Thank you, Andrew, and the Carolina Poets. This is my first public reading. It's weird to do it in 2021. It is 2021 because I'm doing it virtually instead of live somewhere, but or like in a physical location. But I'm really grateful for this opportunity, especially since this last year has been my first year in MFA program, and I've been working very hard on becoming a better poet. So I'm going to read a selection of stuff that I've written over the last several months. This is all new poems that I'm still kind of tweaking and refining. Some of them are as new as like last week, and some of them are as old as like September. So now I don't have any poems picked that talk about ghosts. If I have time, I might read one of those, but I am going to start with a poem I wrote about my python as a segue. So let me find it. Here we go. My pet python, rolled into a legless ball, all belly, your tongue the only appendage to your name, complacent curl under a log hide, eyes in a lidless state of cold wonder. How unfair that your fate should hang on the forked words of an impostor, not even an ancestor. What have we inherited, you and I? I frequently write on subjects that I think about while I'm sitting in church listening to sermons. And so a lot of my poems end up being inspired by biblical stories. I wrote one in my lineup tonight as a response to a sermon I was hearing on the book of Job. If you're unfamiliar with the book of Job, it's a story about a guy who had a whole lot of horrible things happen to him. And there's a portion of the narrative in that book where his friends come by to be supportive, but they kind of aren't very good at being supportive. So I wrote this poem called What Job Wanted to Say to His Friends. You want to tell me where I went wrong? To put your finger on the map's veins and feel its pulse, pointer on the wheel where I rolled off the road. Your silence gives you nothing but my healing. Let the breach between us brace us both. Let sorrow pass like a fever, like the rain. Physicians for the broken bone and friends for the broken soul. Another poem that I wrote as a response to a passage of scripture, I just titled it the reference that I was thinking about as I was writing it. The title is John 8:6, and it's a poem about one of my favorite stories about Jesus. And it's his interaction with a woman who was caught in adultery. Now, in this story, I recommend you go read it. If you can just Google John 8:6 for the full story. But what happened was the religious leaders dragged this woman who'd been caught in the act of adultery before Jesus to kind of trip him up. And, because they wanted to, kind of trip up Jesus with a legal loophole or something. They didn't have the best motivations, right? So Jesus, in response, he draws in the sand, and no one really knows what he wrote in the sand. It's not included in the account. And then eventually he looks up and says to these men who are accusing this woman, okay, so whichever one of you is sinless should throw the first stone at her, because the punishment for that crime was stoning. And they eventually, one by one, just walk away because they realize that none of them are sinless. But I wanted to write a poem about this woman's perspective on this moment. John 8:6. I can't tell you what he wrote, even though his wide hands were inches from my eyes, inches from the pile of stones the size of curled fists. I saw his fingers scrolling through sand and ash. I waited on his silence in the circle of my accusers. Sometimes I imagine he heard the words my head screamed and wrote, "Cast your stones, you sinless ghosts. Throw your words like cinders down. The only roar the heavens hear is rain on the rusted roof. The blood you spill is only yours. The poison seeps between your veins, for your teeth sink deep into your own clay feet." Or maybe that he drew the prophet's staves and serpents on the ground. His words sent every scattered thing away. They slithered from the scene, and I on my belly waited for the crushing blow. Go, he said. Afar off, I heard water rushing down the well, the whisper of a single flower opening in an olive tree. I have a couple other random ones here that I'm just kind of proud of. The viewing. What's left of my last grandparent rests in a black box before stained glass. I remember the rickety park themed like a ghost town. The papier-mâché Main Street has a morgue displaying an old man mannequin lying in a coffin in the front window. I remember the horseless hearse. I try to touch the wrinkled wax face. My fingers meet glass. The morticians did their best to rebuild the blood under his skin, but his face drips from his skull like wax. How hollow the bones, how vacant the suit that floats above him like a reflection. My fingers touch my lips, hot wax to seal the tomb of his brain. I touch his forehead, a casket for memories. The pain shatters, drawing blood. I scrape the pieces from the dust with dripping fingers. I press them together. I hold them up to the light. That poem was based off of a memory of losing my grandfather when I was 19 and sort of processing my feelings about losing someone very important to me. This semester, I also wrote, these last couple months, I wrote a poem called The 17-Year Cicada. If you don't know, 2020 was the year of the 17-year cicada. And I was thinking about how bad I felt for those cicadas for having waited 17 years just to arrive in 2020. So in response, I wrote The 17-Year Cicada. Born just in time for the end of the world, I'd curled in its belly for 17 years, a golden ball of potential, a harmonica folded under glass wings. I'd waited for the earth to move under me, to be ready. Overhead, they called me lazy, self-serving, stupid for not arriving on command. But God wrote me in the red clay with his pinky finger. I waited where he put me. I waited. I grew. I arrived a wing at a time, ready and unready, aching for the green leaves, the summer sighs, the worshipful trees with their weeping bark. But instead, cold eyes met me. 100 men in white coats, frowning, holding stopwatches, pockets full of little silver pins. Just a few more left in my list of things I'd prepared. I'd like to read for you The Offering. The deserts and the forests all cracked, fissured in the fixture, a vessel split and leaking blood into the water, the air, the soil. Oh, we cry, if only we could lower this weary, broken planet into the ground and raise it up again in 3 days. The fool bird cries 2 more times, its black eyes burdened with 70 times 7 red sunrises. We step away from the cosmic graveside with blood on our shovels. The soil we till resists our hands. The fruit it yields, an offering of thorns. I'm not entirely sure how long I've gone. I don't want to max out my time. But I would like to read something that I wrote last week as I was... Okay, Andrew's telling me that I have 5 to 7 more minutes, so here I go. I wrote a poem just thinking about one of my happier memories from teaching English in Croatia, which is something I did for several summers in a row. And this is a poem about a real place. It's called Put Me on Your Mantelpiece. Croatia's Plitvica National Park is famous for its lakes the color of Neverland blue. I mean a blue so vivid you assume you must be dreaming instead of standing by a lake between 2 waterfalls that throw rainbows like parade streamers. The blueness of the lakes depends not on dreams, but on calcium. The water holds so much of the mineral that when a leaf falls into its aquamarine depths, it hardens into stone covered in calcific crystals. I've been to Plitvice National Park, and I've wondered if I fell into one of its enchanted pools, I too might turn into a glass replica of myself, if I'd become a landmark. I wonder if the gift shop at the gate would sell snow globes to tourists depicting me, hovering mid-water, hands reaching toward blue infinity, happy, free. And I think I have just enough time to read one poem about ghosts. So I'm going to read a poem about ghosts. It's a poem about not just ghosts, but about my uncle, who, when I was a little girl, told me about the phenomenon of spook lights, which is, it's a thing where swamp gas collects over railroad tracks and it luminesces. So you get these creepy little balls of light that float down railroad tracks. Spook light. In the dark pine forest in the middle of the night, I hold on tight to my uncle's hand. We're out looking for the old spook light. We'll start looking at the station site and catch the spook dancing down the iron bands in the dark pine forest in the middle of the night. I strain my eyes to see the sight, leaving little footprints in the ashen sand. We're out looking for the old spook light. Among the hanging Spanish moss, we hunt the sprite, Uncle's flashlight glowing like the devil's brand in the dark and deadly forest in the middle of the night. I shiver in my shoes, and he holds me tight. I feel the night uncurling every tangled strand while we're out looking for the old spook light. I wait for the wailing of the wandering wight, but my uncle chuckles lightly, for he knows this land, just a dark pine forest in the middle of the night. I'm out looking for the old spook light. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Emma. That was great. Can you hang out for a few minutes?
Yes.
Great. I'm going to bring the rest of our poets back to the stage. Hello, everybody. Wave to the crowd. All right. So I didn't see any questions in the chat. If you're watching and you have a question, please post your question. I have a question for our poets. Anybody can answer. And I'm just wondering, how has the pandemic impacted your writing? So are you still writing about the same themes that you were writing about before the pandemic, or has anything changed for you?
Yeah,
Anybody want to
I'll go first. I've been in a stuck, just like, I'm just sitting here. And that was one thing I wrote about Emma, was that I admire the fact that like her poems are from September to now, and that she's been able to do it. Cause I just been like following my gut that tells me sit still. But I still think it's cool that others have been able to create, but honestly, nah. I've been cooking.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say they're either not writing or they're writing more than they used to. So what about Emma, Peter? What about you guys?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I tend to write about things after some time has passed. And so I imagine that in a couple of years, the pandemic will find its way into things I'm writing about. I also think it's lovely that Emma shared work that she was working on recently, because that's so hard for me to do. I feel like sometimes I have to sit with a poem and I have to kind of, make sure it's doing what I want it to do. So I want to celebrate Emma for being brave and doing that, because that's something that is really a wonderful trait that'll serve you very well.
All right, we have a couple of questions. Emma, do you want to speak first about writing during the pandemic before we?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm a student, so I had to turn stuff in whether I felt like it or not. I had like 5 deadlines to meet, so it's like I gotta write some poems. So I wrote some poems.
So there you go, Paisley. You just need to enter a writing program or writing just be forced to do it, whether you want to or not. So
it really helps. this was a good year for me to write poems, I think, because it was there's just a lot going on. And in my own personal life, I had several experiences of loss. And so writing became an outlet to sort of process those things. That's why I ended up writing a lot of poems about sad stuff just in my life. I don't know, it worked out. But again, I'm a student. I got to write whether I want to or not. So
there's your answer, Paisley. So Melissa Helton asked a question. Where do you find, this is for all of you, so anybody jump in, where do you find your inspiration and ideas? Do they come up unbidden? Do you go hunting for them through a writing prompt, or do you focus on a particular project? Peter, do you have any thoughts on that question?
Sure. Well, Melissa, I think this is a great question. I find that if I let myself write whatever happens to be at the surface, that's a good way for me to process things. Others had mentioned the sense of processing. I think for me, the projects tend to come into focus as I do them. I sometimes have outlines or broad ideas of things that might emerge, but I think I try to focus on the work first and then let it come together as it will. I've found that if I'm really focused on trying to build a particular kind of project, sometimes the work will end up being against that project. Or the work won't fit into that framework. So I like to let the work guide me where it will, rather than coming with a preconceived notion of how to structure it.
Paisley, Emma, thoughts on where your inspiration comes from? Do you use writing prompts or?
I kind of speak to that. I don't use prompts as much as I should. Usually an idea for a poem comes from something that I've just been thinking about that's completely non-poetry related. It's dangerous to wait for the muse to hit you in the face, but occasionally, because I'd never get any writing done because she's fickle, but sometimes I'll just get like a couple little words, like the cicada poem. I had the line "born just in time for the end of the world," and it sort of hit me, and I didn't know where to put it, and it sat in a notebook for like a couple of months before I actually knew where it should go. So it's kind of a mix of sometimes I'll do prompts and sometimes I just think through things until I know that I have an image to attach to what I'm thinking through. And then that turns into a poem.
Mine just come out of the blue. Just driving home from work or something, and it just happens, and then I write it down, and it might expand beyond that point out of the blue and go bigger, longer, more pages, or it might just be that moment, and that's just what I do. So very, very loose.
Yeah. So Emma, we have a question from Zorina Frey for you. What's your fascination with spooky ghosts and biblical stories? Those two subjects typically like oil and water, in Zorina's opinion.
See, I'm not so sure about that. I think my fascination with spooky things comes from kind of my upbringing. My mom teaches American literature, and one of my earlier memories of being a kid was having her multi-volume set of Edgar Allan Poe open and trying to read it as best I could, looking at the pictures and trying to figure out what's going on based off what's in the pictures. But also I come from a Southern family with lots of ghost stories. So I grew up with all these ghost stories, but I'm a believer. I grew up in church. So I also have that background too. And, even, the Bible has its share of kind of scary situations and scary stories. And there's just a lot of intersect there. I think it has more to do with my individual, upbringing. But I consider all things to be on some level spiritual. And so my faith tends to inform my storytelling and my poetry more than, my interest in spooky stuff. But the spooky stuff is just a part of my heritage that I can't get away from. So it's gonna show up in the poems.
So I was kind of intrigued by Paisley's blue androgynous figures in her dreams. I want to hear a lot more about that. It seems like almost like a theme for a.
I can send you pictures. I tried to paint them.
You tried to paint them? Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, my question was, for the rest, you can speak to this too, Paisley, but do dreams play a role in your creativity, or is it everything comes to you in waking life?
Dreams and waking life for me. Yeah. Sometimes the dreams help me make sense of waking life, or vice versa.
What about you guys?
I think that's a good question. I wish that poems came to me in dreams. I'd probably be able to write more. I think that I try to be as careful and an observer as I can of the world around me, and I try to pay attention to what's happening, and I'm sure that impacts my writing. I think it's a good question. I think I've always admired writers who can seek inspiration from dream states. I think that's great.
Emma, are you dreaming about Job or cicadas, or?
I do tend to have recurring dreams, especially about my family owns a really old house in Georgia, which is where all the ghost stories come from. I have frequent dreams about that house. And like, it's a recurring just place my brain goes when I'm asleep. And it sort of keeps it in my head as I'm like, I hope to one day write a collection that's a collection of poems set about that house and the story of that house. So that's really the only thing that shows up in my poems that also shows up in my dreams. My dreams are very formulaic and kind of boring for the most part, for the exception of like that house. So not usually.
We have another viewer question. So Melissa asks, if you were to say what your big picture goal is for your writing, what are you trying to accomplish when you come to the page? So anybody want to talk about their big picture goal for their writing?
I want to merge photography and poems. I have like a huge vault of photos from a 35mm camera that I've collected over the years, and I want to be able to like pull out the photo and it inspire the poem and then make a book or something like that. Yeah, but that'll take some time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question of the big picture, for me, I've always written because I love to do it. And I know it's a simple answer, but it's really true. Like I really enjoy writing poems. And so I've done it for a long time and I hope to always do it. I'm not sure if I have a big picture other than continuing to write. I think for me, when I write, I'm able to express things and make sense of the world in ways that other forms are challenging for me. And I hope my big picture is to connect with some of the timeless themes that I'm interested in when I write.
I don't know. I'm kind of a baby poet right now. Practically my like goal is to publish a collection, hopefully several collections of poems, but ultimately big picture. My goal is to create poems that show people the magnificence of God's creation, to see how good God is and his reflecting himself in the natural world, in our personal stories, in my own life. That's kind of the big picture. And if I get several books out of that like overall goal, then yay.
Sounds like a good goal. So one final question for the group. We've heard from Paisley, she's a musician, she's a poet, she's into photography. I find a lot of poets have other forms of art that they express themselves through. So for Peter and Emma, is there anything that you guys do beyond writing poetry that's sort of a creative outlet for you?
One of the things that I think I get a lot of creative inspiration from is the opportunity to work with my students. I'm fortunate to work at a small university in South Carolina. I work at Coker University, and I love working with my students and reading their work, and often the things that they're doing will inspire me forward and motivate me, whether it's creatively or in my teaching practice. That's something that I get a lot of inspiration from, those interactions.
I have a lot of different creative outlets. I'm a teacher too, also at a small university in South Carolina, and working with students definitely, it both wears me out and gives me, kind of a reason to keep writing. I see how enthusiastic they are, and it helps me stay enthusiastic about what I'm doing. But I also, I play the violin. I'd like also to do illustration. Like one of these days, I really want to publish a book with my own illustrations in it, because I love drawing as well. Usually if my emotions don't say go write a poem, they say go draw a picture. So I have an Instagram, and I forgot to include that link, where I have all my illustrations that I try and do, but I'm trying to learn more artistic skills to kind of make my art a little better. I tend to cycle through things I'm obsessed with. And so either I'm writing a bunch or I'm doing something else a bunch. And that's the other thing.
All right. I did lie. There is one final question for Paisley. So you had a line in one of your poems that mentioned roses and hot dogs.
Yeah.
So is this the store roses or a physical?
Yeah. Yeah,
so the Southern store roses that
Yep.
I grew up.
My grandmother worked there. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
My mother worked there, and my granddaddy came and bought hot dogs from her, and that's how they met, and that's why we're here today.
I love that, because it brings me back to my childhood. So there's a roses store in Asheville that my grandmother took me to. So, well, I want to thank all of you for being here. Please wave to our crowd. I'm going to close this out, but thank you all so much for joining us. This has been Poetry Goes Viral from Carolina Poets. This is a reading series that we host the second and fourth Thursday of each month. We feature established poets and emerging voices. I want to thank each of our readers, and I want to thank you for joining us. Please check out the links to the poets' work and support art that you believe in. Thank you and good night.